Oh, old school comic book reviews. Okay, this time I have Black Lightning from 1977. Most people may know that Black Lightning was pretty much DC's first black superhero to star in his own comic. Created by Tony Isabella and Trevor Von Eaton. Let's go back here just for a moment, just because I think it's kind of interesting. The backstory of how the character got created was basically, from what I understand, DC Comics at the time decided they wanted to have a comic starring a black superhero, and they were taking proposals or whatever, and the proposal they initially took was one by Robert Kanigher, who was one of their, veteran staff writers. I know he's got lots of accolades for working on DC's war comics, stuff like Sergeant Rock, and I think he did a character called Enemy Ace. I know he did a lot of the, kind of campier Wonder Woman stories from the 60s and stuff like that. But the concept was going to be, called like the Black Bomber, and from where I understand the concept, it was going to be this guy who had two different personas. One persona by day, his secret identity or whatever, was he was like a kind of this white Archie Bunker type guy who would say racial stuff and whatnot, and then by night he'd be this black militant superhero. And the two sides of his persona didn't know about the other, even though they had completely different lives and girlfriends and things like that. And I think when he was the Black Bomber, I think he was like where he would fight crime in street clothes or something like that. Now, where I think there's a little bit of conflict, because I've read two different accounts. One where is that a different editor besides the one who initially accepted the proposal went to Tony Isabella and said, hey, can you tweak this for us a little bit and make it a little bit more usable? And then I've also read that supposedly Tony Isabella himself went to that editor and was like, hey, look, is this really what you want your first black superhero to be like? Why don't you let me kind of, fix it up a little bit? However it went, he obviously got the assignment to, kind of tweak the concept a bit, but basically what he ended up doing was kind of throwing most of it out and, giving us the character that we're familiar with now, basically the character is, Jefferson Pierce. He's, he was somebody who grew up in a kind of this inner city area of Metropolis called Suicide Slum, moves away, becomes successful, becomes this Olympic level athlete, comes back to the neighborhood to teach. He finds out that the neighborhood's being, overrun by this gang / mob called the 100s, right? He tries to stand up to the gang. They end up killing, one of his high school students, in retaliation. And so that's why Jefferson puts on the costume, so he can fight crime and, and nobody else gets hurt. And basically he's helped along with this by an old family friend named Peter, who, helps him make the costume and so on and so forth. What's interesting about the very first issue, we get the origin story, we get Black Lightning fighting bad guys and fighting the 100 and whatnot. However, he doesn't use any superpowers. I mean, all of the fighting is, hand-to-hand combat and stuff like that, and his athleticism and things. And, there's no electrical blast or force fields or any of the stuff that he's going to end up doing, that he ends up doing later on. I mean, if you didn't know he had superpowers, you wouldn't know, he just doesn't demonstrate anything of any sort of paranormal ability or anything like that. Now, next in the issue 2 is where we first see him actually use the superpowers, and the explanation is it's part of the powers are coming from his belt or his belt buckle that, it's some sort of gizmo that Peter has invented or whatever, so that, Black Lightning can be a little bit more super or whatever. And of course, they're all electricity based. He is, little static, working static electricity, minor force fields, touching things and, electrocuting people by, conduction. Is that right? I'm probably saying that wrong, but you get the idea of what I'm saying. In the second issue, he fights Merlin, who I guess is an old Green Arrow foe, and Talia al Ghul shows up, and basically Talia al Ghul shows up because she feels the 100 are kind of competition for her and her dad's criminal activity. So she kind of wants to like wipe out. She helps him fight those guys because she wants to wipe out the competition. And it's pretty funny because since it's an old comic, the character, meaning Black Lightning, has that old school code of ethics where heroes try not to kill people if they can help it. So there's a kind of interesting scene where or it's just interesting if you compare it to like what goes on in comics now, where Black Lightning makes her stop, and she's like, well, what do you care? These men are your enemies. And he's just like, look around you. Hasn't there been enough death? So, as the story goes on in the next few issues, basically we get a little bit more into the 100. Basically we find out the big boss is this guy named Tobias Whale, who's like this big fat guy who's an albino, and he's got this odd shaped head or whatever. And basically, this is my town and I'm taking over. We gotta rub out this Black Lightning guy. We gotta get Superman too, Basically because, like I said before, the stories are set in Metropolis, even though they're part of this, inner city neighborhood. It's still Metropolis, and they are, anticipating they're gonna have to deal with Superman sooner or later. Now, one other thing that's going on is that Black Lightning has been accused of murder because one of the thugs, gets killed, and the cops come on the scene, and they think that Black Lightning did it. Of course, it was Merlin in the previous issue, but who's he's been rubbed out because he's not he's failed the mob or what have you. But like I said, the police think Black Lightning's responsible. So you have Detective I should have took a note. I think it's Detective Harrigan or Hardigan or something like that. He's trying to, track down Lightning and figure out who he is and what he's all about. Now, because this becomes this big story, Jimmy Olsen gets involved. And, which leads up to a guest appearance by Superman. And of course we have the whole thing of there's a misunderstanding, then they have a little fight, then they talk it over, then they realize they're on the same side, and then they end up teaming up to fight a character called the Psychotronic Man, who I guess is probably the first real superhero that Black Lightning had to face at this point. So let's see here. Basically, the stories, they're kind of dated, but they're not kind of dated in the obvious way that you might think. Would it be in the 70s and a black superhero? There's not a whole lot of bad slang and stuff like that. There's not a whole lot of jive turkey and sweet mama and stuff like that. There's a little bit, but it's not really overdone. And I think that's actually a pretty decent, I don't know what I want to say, but it's a good thing because that would have been the easy route to go. There are other comic books out there that do have like black characters in it, and it's full of all this kind of bad slang that you would have gotten off of, Good Times or something like that. But I think it looks like there was a good deal of care into, making the character, meaning Black Lightning, obviously, of course, he's a black character, but he's not a stereotypical character, It's kind of funny. The most goofiest dialogue is, here, let me find it. Here. Lightning wasn't trying to jive me. The cat actually believes I'm working against him. But why? That's probably like the goofiest thing that you got out of these issues. But, who says that? It wasn't Black Lightning. It was Jimmy Olsen. But, I think that's a really positive thing. The art in here is, it's actually kind of stiff. I think this might have been Trevor Von Eaton's first professional work, and in some places it kind of shows, as far as, the layouts are pretty good as far as, storytelling, as far as being able to get from point A to point B and being able to tell what's going on. But, some of his figures are kind of stiff, and sometimes people move in kind of slightly awkward ways, and it's not very dynamic, it really doesn't pull you into the action. You really don't feel a part of the action, and there's not a real building of suspense, It's kind of interesting. The first issue, it says art by Trevor Von Eaton and F. Springer. I guess that's Frank Springer. That's actually a lot better. I mean, there's a lot more shading going on. The characters look thicker. They look heavier. And it's just a little bit sharper. Subsequent issues are inked by Vince Colletta. I don't have a problem with Vince Colletta, but I know there's a lot of people out there who don't really like him and his light, feathery style. I've read things where people have said they felt that he brought down Jack Kirby's work, and they really preferred Jack Kirby with a guy named Mike Royer or whatever. But here, I think he, unlike Frank, I think Frank kind of made up for Trevor Von Eaton's shortcomings. And here, like I said, Vince Colletta has maybe a lighter style. So now it's a lot more apparent where, like his background seemed kind of shaky. They seem a little sparse, you know what I mean? Some of the perspective kind of looks, I don't know, a little odd, everything looks very professional and it's all very competent and stuff, but it seems like it's, just competent, you know what I mean? It's not anything that's going to really blow you away. But in that way, that's how I think the comics dated, where over at Marvel you had, you had your Kirbys and your Buscemas and your Neil Adams. Well, Neil Adams went back and forth for both companies, but you had people following that pattern. Here, the DC artists at that particular moment, the people who weren't freelancing, or just kind of, I hate to say run of the mill, but it doesn't blow your socks off. That's all, But on the other hand, it's like I said, it's perfectly fine, and you can have a fun time reading it. Oh, I wanted to throw this out here too, just because I think it's interesting. Anybody, if you've ever seen the old Super Friends cartoon from the 70s, there's a character in there called Black Vulcan. The way that character happened is, I guess, for that season of the Super Friends, Hanna-Barbera wanted to bring in Black Lightning, and the way I believe Tony Isabella's contract was written was that if any character that he created got used in some other medium or whatever, he would get compensated. And I believe what happened was, DC went to Hanna-Barbera and said, hey, if you want to use this character, you have to pay Tony Isabella. The cartoon studio said, well, you know what, we don't want to pay you guys any more money. We're already using these characters. So, you know what, we're just going to rip off the character and have a character that we own, and that's how you get Black Vulcan. Now, according to Tony Isabella, his side of the story is the way his contract was written, the cartoon people weren't supposed to pay him. DC was supposed to pay him, but DC didn't want to pay him because they were, I don't know, I imagine just being cheapskates or whatever. That's why they tried to get the cartoon studio to pay him. And basically, this is what happened. So Tony Isabella ends up not getting paid, and then we ended up with Black Vulcan. This is going to sound like a terrible thing to say, but just on a selfish fanboy level, we might be a little bit better off because Black Lightning didn't show up in the Super Friends, because if he did, he might have caught, the same thing that Aquaman got, which is the whole thing of being in a lame cartoon So people just automatically think the character's lame as well, just because there aren't any competing images of that character around. You know what I mean? I mean, Superman, Batman, Wonder Woman, they all had other TV shows or movies or really popular comics where people, had other images of those characters besides the ones that's on the Super Friend. Aquaman didn't really have that, so everybody thinks Aquaman is that boring guy in the Super Friends. That might have happened to Black Lightning too if he had ended up on that show. Maybe not, but I think it's just kind of interesting. All right, anyway, I guess that's it. Thanks a lot for listening. Tell me what you think, and everybody have a really good day.